am delighted to be with you. I am Dave Miner. I am a full-time hunger activist from Indianapolis. I attended high school in North Jersey, leading our chemistry team, which was called the Beakers. I got a bachelor's in chemistry, and then I went on for a PhD. And that's when God stepped into my life in a really big way. During my time in grad school, I met my wife, Robin. I became a Christian, and I received a call to help end hunger, which I didn't really understand fully for a good 10 years or so. But it was there, and I joined Bread for the World. After 28 years in the corporate world, I retired and became a full-time hunger fighter, working in the faith community, ending hunger by working at the systems level. Legislative advocacy is my focus, not because I love it. Honestly, it's hard and it's slow, but I do it because of its overarching importance, because it matters. Several years ago, the House had passed a budget bill in DC, which we did the math on it and determined that that would have meant a cut of 50 million meals a year just in the state of Indiana, and just for kids, veterans, and seniors, 50 million meals. There's another 50 million for adults, and that was a 10-year budget proposal. So it was literally a billion meals that they were proposing to cut from SNAP. We knew intimately what the impact of that would be. And so I fasted for 50 meals or 16 days to raise awareness, because we knew that federal legislative actions were that important. To illustrate, let me share another story. I retired from Lilly in 2008. And I became a volunteer executive director for a new Interfaith hunger initiative in Indianapolis. It was a wonderful group of people. I hadn't any interfaith background before that, but it was a group of committed folks from diverse faith traditions, with Jewish rabbis, a Pakistani Muslim, a Sikh leader in his turban, a Black Baptist preacher, a Tibetan Buddhist monk in his long robes, and more. They really wanted to do something about child hunger, and so I was excited enough to join them. Our goal was to end child hunger in Indianapolis and one part of Kenya. For this purpose, we did events and we raised money. Now, in my corporate career, I had zero experience with events or fundraising. And as I said, I had no experience with interfaith work. But I was working with some people who knew a lot, and we were successful. Over a 6-year period, we raised $750,000, $750,000. We even co-hosted a visit of His Holiness the Dalai Lama when he came to Indianapolis. It was wonderful. And with that $750,000, we could do a lot of good in Indianapolis and in this one part of Kenya. I was feeling really good about that, and really good about the 3,000 AIDS orphans who were being helped by the daily school lunch that we provided. We even did an interfaith trip to Kenya and got to meet some of the kids. It was amazing and wonderful. Then came devastating news. And this news came not from Kenya, but from Washington, D.C. While we were doing all of this work for 6 years, there was one vote in Congress, a single act of the US Congress, that took $800 million out of an international school lunch program called McGovern-Dole. So while we were helping 3,000 kids, they took food away from 3 million kids. We knew then that we had to focus on legislative advocacy, as well as the wonderful direct service work that we'd spent so much time on. I tell you this story because you may well want to tackle legislative advocacy. And as you get out and into organizations and churches, You'll find that most people in this country do not see the need for changing the systems. They do not see the need for legislative advocacy. All they see are food pantries and local charities. And this is even true in progressive churches. You'll have members who are interested in advocacy on legislative issues, and then you'll have others who are deeply doubtful about it. So it's important to understand that you need to communicate the importance of changing the systems and legislative advocacy. I have a similar story, as David mentioned, in Indianapolis, by the way, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So we focus on legislative advocacy at the federal level because that's where the most important decisions are made, both domestic and international. And then with the national food programs, all the big decisions are made in Washington. The state agencies get to administer that. They do important work, but they don't set the budget, they don't set the parameters. And then at the local level, the city of Indianapolis, there's basically no impact on those major programs. They can do some other things to help. So federal level legislative advocacy, absolutely essential if we want to actually end hunger. I do this work through Bread for the World in particular for three key reasons. One, grassroots. Bread is grassroots, and I think grassroots are essential. Secondly, bread is about changing the systems. It's not about shipping food, as important as that is, or raising money. It's about changing the systems, particularly the federal government systems. And third, bread is faith-based. And after a long work in this, in all kinds of ways, all kinds of aspects of it, it's become ever clearer to me that we need God in this work. We need God in several ways if we actually want to end hunger. Our experience here, which David referred to, tells us that local people can make a big difference. And I would add, if they organize. I'm sure David has told you about Bread's track record at the national level, but I want to talk to you more about the local level. And first, I need to share with you that Indiana is a very red state. We have a Republican governor. We have a Republican attorney general, et cetera. We have a supermajority of Republicans in both the House and Senate of the state legislature. We have 9 congressional districts. 7 of them are represented by Republicans. After the redistricting of this year, those will all be very safe seats for the next election. So 7 Republicans, 2 Democrats, and we have 2 Republican senators. So if we want to make a difference here, we have to be able to work with conservatives. And thankfully, oftentimes moderates from both parties are the swing. Now, we've seen lots and lots of conversation about the senators from West Virginia and Arizona this year. The moderates have disproportionate influence. So we think there's a real opportunity here to make a difference for hungry people working with conservatives. So what have we been able to do? Well, in 2018, we were able to get 8 of our 9 representatives and both senators to support the reauthorization of something called the Global Food Security Act. We only missed 1 Republican congressman. Senator Young was very active working on famine in Yemen. In 2019, we did Bread's offering of letters in about 55 churches. And from that, we generated over 4,000 letters. We hand delivered those to our representatives' offices and senators' offices. About 1,000 of them, a little over 1,000 of them, were to our brand new senator, Senator Mike Braun. So our first introduction to Mike was 1,000 letters from a lot of people across Indiana saying, hey, this is something you should pay attention to. Just 2 months later, we were able to pull off a event on child hunger in the U.S. with our other senator, Senator Young. We had 325 people packed into a church on the north side of north suburbs of Indianapolis. Those 325 people came from 60 towns and cities all over the state, every congressional district. Some people drove 3 hours to attend that meeting on a Thursday afternoon. And Senator Young spoke about child hunger in the US. He had done a lot of good work on the international side, but we hadn't heard of anything from him about hunger in the United States. So getting him on the podium and talking about it was a big step. I think that was connected down the road a bit later, a few months later. There was actually a positive comment about SNAP in some of his communications, which really surprised and pleased us. In 2021, we did a virtual event with Senator Braun. This time we had 400 people online, again, from every corner of the state. Senator Braun had been very public about things relative to the election and very supportive of President Trump. And there was a lot of question about whether he would be interested in hungry people. He joined, I had a discussion with him online, and he made some really important positive statements. In fact, at one point I said, Senator, you're singing our song. A couple of months later, we had a small group lunch with him with some senior faith leaders, and he spent an hour and a half with us, which was absolutely remarkable. More recently, he was the lead Republican co-sponsor of a letter to the White House about holding a conference on hunger. So I think we've made a real difference. And my topic for you this morning is, how did we get to the point where we could pull these things off? The answer is grassroots organizing. And as we start talking about grassroots organizing, I first need to talk about definitions here. I'm separating underneath grassroots organizing two things. Organizing, which is bringing people into the movement and getting them engaged, and mobilizing, which is, hey, there's an act of Congress that's being under discussion. We need you to call, we need you to write, whatever. So organizing, bringing people in and engaging them in the movement, and mobilizing. And we've long done mobilizing, but we've been able to do much more effective mobilizing now that we've really focused on organizing. So how did this come about in Indiana? I see three stages. The first stage was soon after Bread for the World was founded. We had an enthusiastic group of young people who came together, but we didn't have much in the way of legislative outcomes. We didn't have support from a trained organizer, and so it petered out after a few years. The second stage happened after I joined the board of Bread for the World, and I thought, man, I should build on this, take advantage of this. And a buddy of mine and I started organizing events and starting chapters for letter writing across the state. David came and spoke several times, but we didn't know how to structure and we didn't know how to build on those events. So we had some success, but despite lots of effort, it really didn't blossom. The third stage came when we had coaching on the basics of organizing as opposed to mobilizing. Organizing is about relationships. It's a relentless focus on meeting and getting to know new people. That sounds slow and hard, and it is, but that's really where the action is. It's about getting to know people, recruiting those that are a fit, and developing them as leaders. As Liz Theo Harris told you, movements need committed, competent, and strategically oriented people. You have to go out and find them. You got to interest them, you got to develop them, and you got to integrate them into an organization. And then you can really make things happen. Organizing is not about mass emails or events, although they are a part of the overall work. We did events for many years in Indianapolis, even with David and other wonderful national leaders speaking. but with limited impact. If we have and speak now, we'd structure the event so that we would get to know people, and we'd follow up afterwards with one-on-ones with anyone who showed any kind of leadership potential. And with this approach, we have been able to grow the leadership team from just my friend and I to now 11 leaders for the state. And with this approach to building local leadership, in total, we now have 100 people involved in some kind of leadership role. And that's a big team, and that's the way in which you can get 325 people out on a Thursday afternoon or 400 people online. You can repeatedly pull off of big events and larger actions, and those give us a chance to influence conservative legislators. So in my experience, the keys to our success have been coaching on organizing, that continual focus on meeting, recruiting, and developing leaders. God, we do this work in faith communities, and the faith of activists is important to their persistence and their activism. It's a way that they express their faith. We have been in partnership here with Christian Theological Seminary. Christian Theological Seminary has hosted our events. They've provided speakers, they've provided leaders, and I'll talk in a minute about our classes. Our first class was developed at Christian Theological Seminary and run at Christian Theological Seminary. So that's been an important partnership for us. A third key element of our success is a clear why. There's a lot in the business literature about knowing your why. It's a powerful thing to think about. And we thought about it here a lot. I think I must have spoken to hundreds of groups over the years, Rotary, Kiwanis, church groups, you name it, and helping people understand the need for changing the systems just came out over and over and over again. And we finally settled on this, referring to it using the language of changing the systems. And this is something that people could understand, didn't put them off. Many people, if you say you want to do advocacy, they don't know what it is and they run for the hills. So our why here for our bread organization in Indiana is there is enough food for everybody. Our faith calls us to seek a world where no one goes hungry, and we cannot end hunger if our government does not do its part. With that systems thinking behind us, systems focus, we've now got 3 major classes. One is called Change the Systems 101, Ending Hunger. A second one is God and Systems, and that's a theological look at why we should engage in advocacy. And then the third one is a wonderful program developed by Bread and National Bread called a Racial Wealth Gap Simulation. And we use these classes for recruiting. They're training classes, they are classes, but we use them for recruiting and training, both. So we find folks we can invite, and it's usually personal invitations. It's not, again, not just a mass email. And when folks come out, these classes are structured for conversation. They're structured in a way to allow us to get to know the people who are in the classes. And then we follow up with one-on-ones with everybody that we met at the classes who seems like they might be a candidate for some kind of leadership with Bread for the World. So that was factor number 4 of our keys to success. Factor number 5 is our linkage with the Indy Hunger Network, which is a so-called hunger-free community group, and we'll talk some more about that in a little bit. But that Indy Hunger Network has given us access to data. It's given us access to others who are in this space, but who aren't faith-based. It's given us access to a variety of resources and credibility, that we are really grounded in what's going on with hunger in Indianapolis. Factor number 6, don't overlook the possibilities for, we call them grass tops or influentials. We're blessed here. I think everybody probably has some wonderful potential grass tops and influentials. In this case, Jim Morris. Jim ran the UN World Food Program for 5 years, worked for Senator Lugar when he was mayor, just deeply, deeply connected. Helps that he's a Republican. And Jim has been able to, has been interested to host events, write letters to representatives on our behalf, introduce me to people all over the place. Jim has provided a huge, huge boost and impact to our ability here. So grass tops influentials is another key factor. Factor number 7, we make the case, since we're in a conservative state, we make the case for action in conservative language. And we speak about conservative values. So we talk about security, we talk about families, we talk about jobs, we talk about the economy. We talk a lot less about how many hungry kids there are and how terrible malnutrition is, although it is. And those are certainly included, but that's not the main focus of the conversation when we talk with conservatives. That's factor number 7. Factor number 8, we've developed critical mass. It's hard for people to stay engaged if they don't see results. Bread for the World has provided results at the national level every year for many years, but it's also important to see local results. You know, if you feel like your representatives and senators in your state never support the kinds of things you're interested in, it's really hard to stay engaged. So with the critical mass that we've developed, we are seeing results, the ones that I referred to earlier, and that makes it easier for people to engage. Just a quick story: when we were working hard on the call out to get people to attend the event this April with Senator Braun, some of our lead activists were so discouraged by what they had seen of him in other arenas outside of hunger that they were like, I can't even dial into a meeting with him. That's the kind of discouragement that you can have. Now, it turned out a great meeting. You know, conversations continued, as I mentioned, but I just bring it up as an example that you need to have some local impact, some results from your work in order to keep people engaged. So those are the 8 critical factors we see to success: organizing, God, a clear why about changing the systems, some key classes for recruiting and training, linkage with a hunger-free community group, Indie Hunger Network, grass tops, making the case in conservative terms, and a critical mass and local results. And of course, you don't have to have all of those, and we haven't had all of those all the way along. But in any given place, I think you can bring several of those to bear. So our experience tells us that local people can make a big difference if they organize, if they have a relentless focus on meeting and getting to know new people, recruiting them, developing them as leaders, and engaging them in the movement. And that faith communities are a particularly good place to do this kind of work.